Come join Melissa and her guests on the Chats from the Blog Cabin podcast. From North Carolina, this podcast will have you feeling like you've known these folks for years. Listen in as they chat about life, culture, current events, and more, all with a special Southern flair. Curl up with your favorite beverage and get ready to be entertained. Tune in now for a unique experience that's fun and insightful.
So, hey, y'all, let me ask you a question. What if anxiety isn't exhausting you? It's keeping you from the life you are meant to live. Welcome back to another Chats from the Blog Cabin. You know, the show where I virtually invite people into the Blog Cabin to chat about life. And, you know, March is Women's History Month. So I always want to start out with a quote before we start into talking about anxiety and worry, which is what Jennifer is here to do today. The quote is, "Worry does not empty tomorrow of its sorrow. It empties today of its strength." And it's by Corrie ten Boom. And I think that's a perfect quote to start off our conversation about anxiety. Jennifer, before we get into anxiety, though, tell us a little about yourself.
Well, I started writing these books because I worked as a school counselor. So I have been a school counselor for 14 years. I still work in the schools now, and I just really wanted resources to help students and parents, teachers, counselors. I have 2 children of my own. My children are 13 and 15. I live in Pennsylvania with my husband and my 2 children and my 2 dogs. So that's a little bit about me.
And 13 and 15 are hard ages. I mean, my girls are young adults now, but I remember those teenage ages. The anxiety is through the roof. They have so much peer pressure and society pressures and the pressures they put on themselves. So let's talk about how you navigate that.
Yes. So it's hard as a parent because, you know, from day to day, it changes as far as, first of all, they talk about like 13-year-olds, how, you know, one day they're like an 8-year-old, the next day they're like a 23-year-old. So it's like navigating that too, trying to figure out what they need. And with topics like anxiety or any of the topics I wrote about, it's like really kind of taking their lead and seeing how their day was, if there was anything they wanted to talk about. If they don't want to talk about it, just kind of giving them that space and letting them know that you're there. So it can be hard because you as a parent have your own days and your own ups and downs, and they don't see that. They see like their stuff that they're going through, and you want to be there for them, you know, when they want to talk, because they don't always want to talk, and just kind of be ready and kind of take their lead.
Yeah, and we'll have to talk about something that you just mentioned there about parents. We have rough days, and we also deal with anxiety too. So
Yes.
It's hard to tell your kids, okay, you know what, I'm feeling the same exact thing that you're feeling, because the kids aren't believing you when you're telling them, hey, I have anxiety too. This is my deal. You know, maybe you got it from me, and that and so forth.
Yes, that's true, right?
So how do we as parents navigate our own anxiety to help our children with their anxiety? Because I think that's very important, because a lot of parents like to stuff things under the rug until it like blows up. And then the kids see that. So they think they're supposed to stuff things under the rug.
Yeah. And that's what they always tell us as parents, that the kids are watching us. They're observing so much more than we think that they're observing. So really focusing on yourself and checking in with yourself and seeing how you feel, because if you feel anxious and stressed and really hurried, like you're going from this thing to that thing and you just don't have time to think and be calm and kind of be in the moment, just kind of taking notice of that yourself and working to be as calm as you can be, not only for yourself, so you're modeling good things for your children, but also for yourself and how you feel, and also so that your children have the chance to be able to share with you. Because if they're seeing you being so hurried and so rush, and there's no time to get anything done, they're not going to feel comfortable saying, oh, I had a bad day, I want to talk about it for 10 to 15 minutes. They're going to feel like you don't have time. So it is so important as a parent to see how you're feeling and to be allowing yourself to be a little bit selfish, because it's not selfish. So even the most selfless people, I think, can see that taking that time is so important, because you are giving it back to your children. If you don't have it for yourself, you can't give it to them.
For sure. And I think your book, My Anxiety is Messing Things Up, is a great talking point to get parents and kids to talk about their anxiety. Because I think because I told you before we came on that I read the book and I was like, adults need to read this book, even though it's written for children, because I
Yeah.
think adults can relate as well. And then that be able to relate what pressures they're putting on themselves and their anxiety with their kids and say, you look, mama and daddy do the same exact thing. Let's
Right.
talk about some strategies.
Yeah. And that's why I thought it would be really good for parents to read with their child or check in with their child after their child reads it and they read it separately, because then you can prompt your child to try some of the coping strategies to see if that's how they're feeling, and just have a talking point to bring it back to what happened in the book and what we can do if you're having an anxious time period, maybe a week or two after reading it. It's like, okay, remember we learned about some coping strategies. It looks like you're feeling anxious. Check in with your body. Is that how you feel like you're feeling? Are you noticing anything in your body? So I think it's really great for parents to do that preliminary talk with their child about mental health struggles or, relationship struggles, anything that they're going through, so that during times of, not crisis, but during times where these situations come up, you have already done the legwork of talking about it. And then you can say, remember when we did talk about that? This is a time where you could use some of those coping strategies. So that's how I would bring it up as a parent.
So let's jump back a little bit and let's talk about what is anxiety. Because I know a lot of people say, I'm so anxious for this, I'm so anxious for that, but they really can't put words on what they're feeling. So what actually is anxiety?
Anxiety is when your body responds to a threat. So the difference between anxiety and an actual fear-based threat is usually the anxiety is just in your mind. It's not something that is actually threatening you physically, but your body responds in the same way. So you might get a racing heart, you might get, nervousness in your stomach, you might be clenching your muscles. There's so many different physical symptoms of anxiety, but that's what happens. And it turns on the fight or flight or freeze response that people have in a dangerous situation, but it's all emotional and the threat is in your mind. So that's why it's important to use the coping strategies to calm down so that you can make your best choices for yourself.
So let's jump off that and go into what the coping strategies are, because I think that's very important. And I like what you said in the book about how not every coping strategy works for every person, that you have to find out what works for you.
Yes, yes. And it's very important because I think that sometimes kids will try a coping strategy and they'll say, oh, it didn't work. I don't think anything's going to work. I don't think anything's going to make me feel better. And it's important to learn the coping strategies, to let yourself know how to learn the coping strategies so you can use them well, especially in a time of stress, and your body knows how to respond to them. And also knowing that we're all so different. So we have different coping strategies that will feel good for me versus you versus someone else. So some of the coping strategies are exercise is a great coping strategy. And a lot of these coping strategies can be changed based on the environment that you're in. So I talk about with students often that exercise, people usually think you can't use exercise as a coping strategy, maybe at school, but you can get up and go for a walk. You can do push-ups against the wall. You can just like go into the restroom and kind of just like shake your body and get some of the nervous energy out. And if you're nervous in a sporting activity, it's a really great opportunity to use exercise as a coping strategy, because you can just like do a couple real quick runs or do a couple jumping jacks. But as adults, they tell us all the time that exercise is a great coping strategy, to exercise every day, to keep your stress level down, or if you are feeling really anxious during a certain day, go for a walk. So that's one coping strategy. Another coping strategy is journaling. So journaling is so great because it gets all of the thoughts out of your head and onto paper, so you don't feel that pressure to remember it and to respond to it. But that's, like I say, not everything will work well for every student or every person, because journaling is such a great coping strategy. But if you have a child who doesn't love schoolwork and feels like journaling is just another chore, that's not going to feel like a good fit for them. But we talk about journaling in the book. Another one that's talked about in the book is creative outlet. So dancing or drawing or painting, writing, reading a book. Those are all really great coping strategies, and they use your creative outlet as that's a way to express how you're feeling, but also it puts your mind into a different place so you're not focusing on your worry. So those are just some of the coping strategies that I talk about in the book.
And I like also how when you talk about it in the book, you talk about maybe combining the two. Maybe if you really don't really like journaling, but go ahead and put some thoughts down, put a couple of sentences down, then go outside and play basketball or ride your bike or walk or something if you're at home, just something to kind of release those worries. And I love the fact that you said you can combine them, because like you said, not all work for all people.
Right. And different work in different environments too. Like deep breathing you can always do, but then you might want to combine that also with journaling or exercise. So yeah, I like for students and people to have a lot at their disposal so that they can use whatever they feel like is appropriate in the situation.
Yeah, and I think that's a great stopping point for us to take a brief commercial break, and we'll be right back.
When cancer crashed into my life, it tried to take everything: my health, my career, even my joy. But I refused to let it. Instead, I discovered something powerful, that laughter and hope and small moments of joy could be just as powerful as any prescription. I've worn many hats: entrepreneur, consultant, speaker, and most importantly, mom. But the role I never expected: cancer thriver. And I realized that my story isn't just mine. It's something that others needed too. My book, Finding Hope and Joy in Cancer, is part survival guide, part pep talk, and yes, even part comedy special for your soul. It's raw, it's real, it's filled with wisdom and stories and laughs that helped carry me through treatment and beyond. Over the years, I've built companies and communities, but this mission is different. It's about building resilience, one story at a time. My mission is simple. Hope, it's not optional. It's essential. And joy, it's waiting for you, even in the hardest chapters of your life. I'm Amanda Gunville, speaker, author, and cancer thriver. And I'm here to talk about humor, resilience, and what it really takes to find joy when life feels impossible.
And we're back chatting with Jennifer about anxiety in her book, My Anxiety is Messing Things Up. And I can see a little kid saying this in his mind: my anxiety is messing it up, and all the pressure we put on ourselves. I want to talk real quick about, why do you think now the term anxiety is being used so often, and you see so many people talk about it now, as before you hardly ever heard about it?
Well, I think our country is doing a better job at recognizing mental health and recognizing that it does start at a young age, and it's important to educate children on mental health so that they know what to watch for and they know how to get help for themselves. So I do feel like we're doing a better job talking about it. So I think that's a really great result of it. But I also know that anxiety is on the rise. So anxiety did increase during the pandemic, and then it also increased prior to that in adolescence. So that is another one of the reasons.
I can see the anxiety, especially from the pandemic, because my youngest daughter was one of those 2020 graduates that didn't get a chance to graduate and do anything. And it's taken her a while to actually get back out in the world, because she was so confined for that whole year of her senior year, basically at home.
How's she doing now?
she's doing much better now. I mean, she's out more and doing so much better, but it took her a while to get out. And all we could do as parents just to be, we try not to push her because we knew that was going to heighten her anxiety. But we also knew that she needed to get back out there or she would never get back out there.
Right. Right. And I feel like to normalize mental health struggles, that part of being a human is to have the ups and downs. It's not always going to feel great every single day, but it is important to get out there and do your best. And the whole idea that 100% from day to day is going to differ. So giving 100% on Monday might feel different than giving 100% on Thursday, and to allow yourself that grace.
So do you want to read part of your book so that everybody can see what you're talking about? Because I think it's very important. It's such a cute book, but it's such a good book. It was packed full of so much information that I was like, man, I wish I had known this when I was growing up.
I know. Thank you. I appreciate that. So this is my book, My Anxiety is Messing Things Up. And I'll just read a quick excerpt from it. So this is when Oscar is exploring joining the group at school that's helping students who are struggling with anxiety. So he's talking to the school counselor, and the school counselor is talking to him about the group. So Oscar had described what he was worried about, and then we're taking the conversation from there. My answers hung in the air for a moment before Mrs. Wang spoke. That does seem like a lot to worry about. You mentioned your parents. Do you feel like they're unhappy with you or disappointed in you? I shook my head no. To be honest, I probably should have nodded yes. They always say they want me to try my best, but my brother's super smart. My best and his best are really different. I just don't want to be the one who always disappoints them, I said. It sounds like you're feeling a lot of pressure to keep up with your brother and to meet your parents' expectations. I think you'd really benefit from joining the counseling group at school for students struggling with stress and anxiety. It's called the Coping with Anxiety and Taming Stress Group, but that's too long. CATS is our fun nickname. I don't want to join a counseling group, even one with a fun nickname, but I didn't want to hurt her feelings. The group is made up of students your age who are feeling stressed. In group, we'll talk about what causes stress and strategies to help you deal with it, she explained. Everyone needs strategies to manage their stress, and this group will teach you several different ones you can use. I do need to learn how to de-stress, I guess. I want to be able to sleep and not feel so worried all the time. Maybe the group isn't such a bad idea.
And I love that. I love that you brought together a whole bunch of different kids from different backgrounds to join that group, because I think that's important, that each kid that's reading the book can identify with the person that's in the book.
Yeah, that was my hope, because they have different triggers as to what makes them anxious. They have different physical responses to the anxiety, and then they also have different coping strategies that work for them. So I thought it would be a really great way for students to see, or children to see themselves in the characters in the book and relate to it and be able to bring it into their own life.
And what I also love too is the fact that you talk about Oscar trying to be like his brother in his comparison, because if you have siblings, and I had 3 older sisters and I was the youngest of 4 girls, that comparison is very, very high, especially if you go to the same school. You're not only getting comparison at home, you're also getting comparison if you have the same teachers and you're in the same school. So that can cause a lot of anxiety.
It can, right. And sometimes it's like, you have to talk to yourself and say that you're doing your best and you're not your sibling, and you have different goals, you have different talents, but it can really create a lot of pressure, especially on those younger years, because they haven't had the experiences in the world to know that it's okay. You know, there's a lot of paths to success. You don't have to be exactly like your sibling.
And what I also love too is that you, like I said, you also brought all these kids together, but you had that counselor that's there facilitating, these are strategies you can use. So like, even if a child is reading the book, they feel like they're part of that group. They're part of that counseling group, that, hey, you know what? I'm there. I'm sitting there. I'm going to voice what I'm saying to maybe your own counselor. Like you said, you're a school counselor. Maybe go to the counselor and say, I read this book. feel this way, or hey,
Yeah.
mom, I read this book. So it's jumping off point to have talks with your kids about anxiety.
Yes, yes. And it's such a heavy topic and such a big topic. And I wanted to make it more manageable for parents to help their children through anxiety and to have the language to use, because you want to speak to your child on their level and not scare them and talk about, the possible consequences of anxiety, because it is normal to have anxiety. If something means a lot to you, you're going to be anxious before a presentation, before your class, or a job interview, or whatever your situation is. So you are going to have that anxiety. So if you can learn coping strategies, you're so well prepared to go into situations that you really care about and that cause you anxiety.
So let's do the social media of it all. The
Okay.
anxiety and the comparison with social media. A lot of people get a lot of anxiety because they feel like social media people that post on social media are those perfect people, when it's a highlight reel.
Yeah. Yeah. And kids especially, I feel like they've grown up with it, and they see these images that people spend so much time selecting a perfect image and perfect lighting and all these things. And so they just put this pressure on themselves that that's how they should look and that's how they should feel all the time. And like I said, you are going to have ups and downs. And that person on social media doesn't never experience downs. They're only showing you the positive things, but it can be a lot of pressure on kids. And then even in their network and their social community, they'll see on Snapchat that all these people have gotten together, or they'll see the TikTok videos and they'll know everyone got together and they weren't invited. So it really can, hurt them, where they used to have these safe places at home where they could escape from some of those pressures. Now they just pull out their phone and they see these images and they see these get-togethers and they feel like they're missing out. So it can be hard for them to talk through that and know that it's okay to not be invited to every single thing, and know that it's okay to not click with every single group at school. No one's going to do that. So it does make these adult conversation and adult pressures, or even like later teenage pressures, come into kids' lives at a much younger age.
So what's the solution to that? Not letting them have a phone till they're emotionally, physically ready to handle it, or not letting them have social media until they're...
I think not letting them have a phone is a really great way to handle it. I had my children, they were able to get a phone this summer before their 7th grade year, which now people are saying to wait even longer, but that ship had sailed by the time I heard that. But they were definitely late with getting a phone. I think that's one way to handle it. But you do want your kids to be prepared to be out in the world. You want them to be able to have a way to communicate with their friends. So the phones do have a place in children's lives. So I think just having these conversations and sharing that social media is not representative of what that person is actually doing in their life day to day. It's a little snapshot. It's the best of their life. So talking through those things, talking through that it's normal to struggle with it too, though. It's normal to feel sad if you're not invited to something. It's normal to feel disappointed that you're left out. It's normal to want some of these things that people are talking about on TikTok, and want this like beauty routine and this and that. And, that you have to try to, prioritize things. You can't have everything. So talking through some of those pressures that are really in your children's lives and they're having to deal with.
Yeah, and I think that's important. But at what age do you think it's important for them to be on social media and to hold off until the age? Because you said that it wasn't until your 7th grade year that your kids actually got a phone. What age do you think social media?
I allowed my children to be on social media when they got the phone. So then that was 13. But I mean, ideally holding off as long as you can. I think it depends on your community, because if you see that they're not knowing about activities, my kids were using my phone. So I would be on these text chains with all of their friends and they would be communicating that way. And that's how they would know what was happening and be able to ask questions and be able to show up to things. So I do feel like that has a time period too where you can do that, but then you also want to trust your child to communicate with their friends and to be on social media in a responsible way. So I would think ideally social media at 15, but I didn't follow those instructions because of the pressure of getting a phone and being able to connect with your friends and being able to see what the memes are and what this is and what that is. So you don't want to isolate your kids too much. So you do unfortunately have to gauge it based on your community and if they're missing out because of not having a phone, because you don't want it to be a hindrance to your child, but you want them to be ready. So it's really trying to take it on what your child is ready for, and then making sure you have the conversations about responsible phone use and what's out there and communicating with people you don't know and not putting images out there that showcase them in a bad light, not responding to other people's images in a mean way. I mean, there's so many conversations to have. I feel like when you feel like your child is ready for it, then that's when you can give it to them.
Yeah, I know. I have a friend of mine who puts limits on her son's social media so that he has a certain time limit, and once it's off, parental controls come into place. And I think that's important because a lot of times we get sucked into that social media hole. As adults, we can get sucked into the social media hole. And before you know it, you've lost almost a whole day just scrolling on social media.
I know. And you want to help your children with that so they don't fall into that same pitfall, because it's always when you're tired and you're just sitting there and scrolling, and you want your children to have some parameters around that so they're doing what's important for them too, like their homework and getting good sleep and interacting with their family and interacting with friends in real life. So those controls are important and the time limits are important.
So what do you think the ideal time limit, or do you think it's based on every child should be on social media?
I think it should be not more than an hour a day that they're on social media. I mean, ideally, because they do check out when they're on social media. They're just watching the TikTok videos, it's grabbing their attention. And I feel like it is hard for them to want to engage when this thing is in front of them that's keeping their attention and everything's new all the time. I think an hour or 2 hours is the maximum that each child should be on social media per day.
So going back to your book, what made you decide to write the book? And you also wrote a companion book to go with the book for counselors, teachers, and for parents, which I absolutely love because I'm a former teacher. So I'm like, I get that. I was like, this book right here needs to be in every classroom, and everybody needs to talk about it, because with the pressures that the kids are facing now, earlier than when I was growing up. I mean, we didn't have social media. We didn't have internet. We didn't have teaching myself. So, it's just like we parents have to kind of engage and learn as well as what's going on, because this is stuff that new parents or parents or older parents didn't have this when they were growing up. So they have all this extra pressure that kids are on them now.
Yes, I know. You're right. And it's like, we have to respect the fact that they are growing up very different than we did, and respect the fact that their stresses are real. And I feel like parents sometimes idealize the growing up years, but when you're a kid, you don't know that adulthood is hard, and paying the bills is hard, and being an adult every single day is hard. You just think it's all freedom and you have so many choices. And so they do feel anxiety and pressures during their growing up years. So the reason that I wrote the book is because I was working at a high school. I was working as a high school counselor, and I was running a group for students who were struggling with anxiety. And I had probably 8 students in the group, and I would plan the lessons, and we would have lessons each week and talk about things. And I had this one really great model group member who was so comfortable being vulnerable and sharing and talking about her experiences. And she set the tone for all the students in the group, and they all felt comfortable sharing and talking. But I thought, a book would be a really great way to engage students and allow them to talk about anxiety in a way that's not threatening, or in a way before they feel comfortable around the other students. So they could talk about the characters and the characters' experiences and relate that to their own lives, but talking through the characters until they feel comfortable being vulnerable and sharing. So that's why I wrote the book, because I thought this would be so great as a school counselor to just grab a book like that, read a chapter or two per group session when the students met, and then talking through how the characters dealt with the situation. Would you respond that way? Do you think that is a good way to respond? How else could they have responded? You know, have you ever felt that way in your own life? And just allow it to prompt questions and conversation. And with working with students, I feel like it's so relaxing for students to be read to at any age. I feel like that's why as adults we love the audible books, because it is relaxing. So it just gets them into this great headspace of listening to a story and being able to relate to the characters and talk about the characters, and not in a way that they have to be vulnerable right away. They can just take it at their own time and talk about themselves when they feel comfortable. So that's what prompted me to write the book. And then, like you said, I really liked that it could show different triggers of anxiety and different ways that your body can respond to anxiety, and that the coping strategies can be different based on your personality and based on what you like to do.
Yeah, and I do say that I love the fact that you had the counselor and it had talked about ways they could exercise when they're feeling anxious, like when they're taking a test or something like that. Because obviously you can't, during an exam, you can't get up and leave the room to
Right.
exam, but you're talking about like just doing like movements in your chair. So let's talk about those types of movements, because I know a lot of parents want to instill that, especially if a kid's waiting in the waiting room and they're all like running around and you're like, no, you need to sit down, but they still want that movement. So let's talk about some of the things that parents and kids can do if they're in a space where they can't just get up and walk away or exercise.
Well, in the book, I had the school counselor talk about chair push-ups. So that's when you make your arms straight and you push it against your chair and you just lift your lower body, you lift your bottom and your legs, your thighs off the chair, just to use some of that movement and to get some of the movement out. So I talk about the chair push-ups. The other things that I talk about in the book is using deep breaths during a test or before a test or while you're taking a test. If you start taking the test and realize that you thought you knew the information and it's a little bit harder, or you're having trouble remembering the information, talk about doing deep breaths. And I talk a lot with students about doing the 5-finger deep breathing. And that's when you take a deep breath in as you trace up your finger, and then you hold it for about 3 seconds, and then you let the breath out for the 5 seconds as you go down. So you trace your hand doing the deep breaths, and it allows the child to have the deep breaths to concentrate on all the different components of a deep breath. That you do have to deep breathe in really deep with your stomach muscles and your diaphragm, and then hold it and then breathe out and make sure you see your stomach moving in and out. Tracing it on your hand gives children a way to know that they are giving their body time to relax by using the deep breathing exercises, because sometimes children can say, I did it and I didn't feel any better, because they quickly do it and they rush through the process of doing the deep breathing. But if you allow yourself the time to do the deep breathing exercises, then it can allow your body to respond, and you're using all the components of the deep breathing. So that's another way that while taking a test, you can relax yourself. You can do the chair push-ups, and you can also do the deep breathing exercises to relax yourself without anyone knowing what you're doing, just doing it on your own.
And I love the fact you just pointed out not to rush through the deep breathing, because I think we're a society that rushes. We can go on Amazon and order whatever we want. We want DoorDash. We want things to come through our deliveries, everything we want it. Then now we have a computer. basically at our fingertips where we can look up any information that we want. So it's hard for us to just sit still and just focus on the breath. So I think that's
Yes.
important that we don't rush through that.
Thank you. Yes, it is important. It's important to teach the kids that too. And in the book, the counselor talks about seeing your stomach come in and seeing your stomach go out, go out when you're exhaling. So it's important to give them those parts of their body to watch for, to make sure they're really giving themselves the time to do the exercise properly so their body can respond to it.
So, Jennifer, our time is almost up. Is there one last little tidbit that you either want to reiterate of something that we've already talked about or something we haven't talked about that you want to talk about? The floor is yours.
Thank you. The big thing that I would like to talk about is just that these books are out there and they exist, and they're there to support you when you work with the students you care about or when you work with your own children. So just use the resources to help you and support your child, and to just remember that there is so much that these kids are dealing with every day, and they don't have the multiple phases of their life that they're going through. So their school is their whole world. That's their social situation. They come home to their family, which is an escape, but there's so much of what they do that's involved into their school. So it really holds a lot of weight if they have a bad day, or if they're feeling rejected by their peers, or if they're struggling with anxiety at school. So give them the time they need to talk about their day and to learn coping strategies and to check in with them, and also use the supports at your school to support your child. Also, the school is there to help you too, and you're a team to work together to support your child.
And I think that's very important that you said you're a team, because if you go in to a teacher, period, or a counselor or a principal, and say, what are you going to do about the situation, instead of saying, what can we do together to
Right.
help the situation, you're going to get more, you're more likely to get someone to cooperate with you if you say, what can we do together, as instead of saying, what are you going to do about it?
Yes, very true. Yes.
So Jennifer, tell people where they can find you at.
So you can find me on my website is storiesbyjennifer.com, and I have an Instagram and a Facebook with the same handle, Stories by Jennifer, or Stories by Jennifer Licati.
And then what other books have, if parents are looking for other things besides anxiety, what other books are out there by you that deal with issues that kids are coming up with?
I have 9 books right now. My 10th book is coming out in August. So behind me is I Lost My BFF. That is about changing friendships and friendships that end, how to deal with that. I have Faking Happiness, Feeling Sadness, which is about feeling depressed. I have Why Is He Spreading Rumors About Me, about rumors. I have My Schoolwork is a Mess, about organization and study skills. So there's 9 books. There's one on fitting in and not feeling the pressure to fit in with everyone, but being your own person. I have one about the difference between bullying and teasing and how to deal with both. That's called He's Not Just Teasing. So there's a lot of books. Go onto my website and see if there's a book that can help your child. And if you have an idea for a book that I haven't written, feel free to send me an email. I love to hear what parents want and what books you feel like there's a need for. So I'd love to hear from you too as parents.
And where can they find your book besides on your website?
On Amazon and Barnes and Noble and anywhere books are sold. Boys Town Press is my publisher. They have the books also.
And I will say, I wish when I was teaching that these books were around, because I definitely would have used them. But I did use some of the strategies because I was a kindergarten through 5th grade music teacher. So when I saw that the kids weren't paying attention, I would say, okay, let's get up and get the wiggles out. And that's because, at different ages, there's more they're not concentrating. You're like, okay, get the wiggles out. We'll do a dance party, whatever. And then the kids were okay. They were ready to learn again. And
that's
so
great.
That's important as well. And even just a matter of just like clapping your hands and having them mimic what you're clapping. 2 is another great strategy for kids and parents as well. Because the parents could be clapping to get the kids' attention, and all of a sudden, okay, now you do it, and then there'd be a fun game, and then before you know it, the anxiety's out the window because they're laughing so hard trying to keep up with each other.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great way. Get your mind off of it, right?
Yeah. So, Jennifer, thank you so much for coming on and for sharing and for writing this book. And you said you had another one coming out in August. So please put me down because I would love to continue this conversation, and I would love to promote your August book as well. So please put me down as interview for August when your book does come out, because I think this is important conversations that we all need to have.
Okay, great.
Mental health is not talked about a lot, and mental health in children especially is not talked about.
Right.
Once we start talking, we can maybe not solve all the problems of society, but we can solve some of the problems if we have open conversations like this.
Yes. Yes. I love that. Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. It's been great talking with you.
All right. So guys, I will put in the show notes everywhere you can find Jennifer, as well as some of the strategies she's talked about. And until next time, if you know someone who's dealing with anxiety, please share this episode with them, even if it's your child, because I think you will definitely get a lot from Jennifer's book. Like I said, I read the book as an adult, and I was like, it helped me out so much that I wish I had this when I was growing up, because I think anxiety is something that we don't talk about a lot, but it's something that's very common in everyday life. So until next time, guys, bye.